Alrighty, greetings and salutations everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff and welcome to our Monday night live stream for now week 12 of the 2024 fantasy football season. For the next hour, we're talking anything and everything fantasy football related. So if you have any questions, make sure you type in the live chat and or if you want priority, send in the super chat. When you do send in your question, please do me a favor. Make sure you include your scoring format, whether that is a standard, half PPR, full PPR. The more context you provide, the easier it will be. But outside of that, let's talk about what happened in week 11. Dude, I mean, that game right there. I mean, my soul was crushed. As soon as that Nico Collins touchdowns to start the game gets called back, I knew. From there on out, I knew, all right, it's not hitting. There's no way that we can get that to happen and then we're not getting it called back. Like, at this point, I had a feeling off the rip that was going to happen. And then that other catch later in the game, I already knew it wasn't a catch. I didn't even have to watch it. I was like, all right, I'm not watching this game anymore. But hey, if you have Joe Mixon, congratulations. If you had Houston defense, congratulations. Nico Collins, again, he'll get better with time. He had a couple opportunities there for some big plays. Unfortunately, didn't end up hauling him in. The offense, specifically the passing game of this team, for the Houston Texans, very much so lackluster as of even with their pieces back. Hopefully, it's going to change as we continue because that was a great matchup for them. But the fact that CJ Stroud not able to take advantage of it, very unfortunate. On the other side, of course, Jake Ferguson going down with a concussion, so he'll probably miss this upcoming week. So for those of you who are in need of a tight end, if potentially some of the guys that we mentioned earlier today on the waiver wire episode are not available, Schoonmaker, his backup, obviously played relatively well in his absence. But outside of that, again, CeeDee Lamb was decent. Obviously, this offense cannot score, and because of that, their overall upside for each individual player is going to be capped. And, obviously the kicking game, if it wasn't for that slap to the helmet, we had a 64-yard field goal for the Aubrey Truthers in the chat. Obviously, that is a brutal one. But either way, let's get into answering questions, shall we? Going into week 12. Again, whether it is a waiver wire question, trade question, and or starter sit question, I would say that relatively it may be a little bit too early to talk about starts or sits because there's still a lot of information that is yet to be divulged in terms of injuries, all that kind of jazz. But hey, listen, if you have a question, ask it. And if I can answer it, I'll do my best to do so. But expect that the answer could potentially change as we get closer to this upcoming Sunday. All right. Thank you very much. We begin today with the first question sent in by Lou. Lou, thank you very much. Says, in a one flex league, PPR, 7-4 currently, we have Murray, we have Mixon, okay? We have Bijan, Puka, Sutton, Moore, Kincaid, trade Baker and Shakir for Marvin Harrison Jr. Also traded Chuba Hubbard for Brown and Najee. Good deals. Okay, so trading away Chuba Hubbard in order to get what you got in return is fantastic. Now, the potential of trading Baker and Shakir in order to get Marvin Harrison Jr., considering you're not going to need Baker because you have Kyler, I think it's perfectly fine to do so. The only thing that I'm potentially sketched out about, if you asked me, Andrew, who would you rather have rest of the season? I'd rather honestly have Baker Mayfield. I think that Kyler Murray is a great quarterback. He is definitely going to be of, a top 8 variety or capacity going forward, but I think Baker's better than him. So with the upcoming matchups that, Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have with New York, Las Vegas, Carolina, I mean, it just seems like he's just going to tear apart these defenses. I don't know if I want to make that trade. And I honestly like what Shakir's been doing as of late. Each of the last, 4-5 games has had 6 or more receptions in a full PPR. Highly valuable. He is the number 1 target for Josh Allen. With everybody else dealing with injuries, Kincaid included, I think I'd keep, honestly. Now, if you wanted more depth at wide receiver, I could understand as to why you would go after Marvin Harrison in this circumstance, but I think I'd keep in your situation, Lou. Thank you. All right, Jesus sends in a question. Jesus Chavez says, trade Tyreek Hill / JT for Debo and Bijan. I have T, Puka, and Marvin. Okay, so here is the thought process at the moment. If you're in a position where going forward, you do not need Bijan Robinson this upcoming week because, again, he is going to be facing a bye week. In the event in which you do not need him and you're just purely preparing for the fantasy playoffs, I'm okay with that trade. But, again, if you're going to need someone to fill in for this week, I don't know if making that trade does you any service. Again, it's very much so dependent on your current record. And if the record is okay with you potentially losing a little bit of depth in the upcoming performance, because again, you won't have JT taking on Detroit, you won't have Tyreek Hill taking on their matchup this week, so you'll be absent of Bijan. You said you have T against Puka, Marvin. I'm not really worried about that. I'm just really worried about whether you have enough RB depth and whether your potential current record is efficient enough to be able to make sure you get into the playoffs. If it is, then I don't mind it. All right, John Dennis sends in a question. Says, any low end RBs you got rest of season? I got 2 RBs on bye with this week. I mean, look, The running backs that we've talked about, and many of you guys can attest to this, over the course of the last, I want to say, 14 straight live streams that we have done, every single time out, I will come out and say, hey, we are trading for Tracy, we are trading for Connor, we are trading for Bucky, and at worst, we are trading for Rachaad White. So, in the case of your question, asking for a low-end RB2 for the remainder of the season, I mean, I think Rachaad White theoretically could fill into that overall parameter. As to whether or not you're able to get him, obviously, it's very much so dependent on the team that you are trading with. But again, thus far this season, he's averaging, he's RB25 in terms of point per game averages over the course of this season. If you cannot trade for a player of that capacity, I think there's a possibility where you could venture down the path of going after guys like Najee Harris coming off of a lackluster performance. But I think going forward, again, this is still a run first team. Outside of that, again, I'm still on the potential Tracy train. But yeah, everything else I think would be kind of out of reach if we're talking about RB2s. Like, I don't know if I'm actively trading for Tony Pollard. I mean, I guess you could, but it is very much so matchup dependent. Let me see the Titans matchups upcoming. Let's see. Upcoming ahead, they have Houston, which is not terrible. Then they have Washington, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis. Yeah, I mean, I think Tony Pollard could also work in this circumstance. I don't think it's that bad. And especially with Tyjae Spears going down with the concussion yesterday, I think it could potentially work in that scenario. Thank you, John. So those are a couple names. You can let me know if those are potentially already rostered by you. If they are, we could potentially come up with other names. Austin M in the chat says, barely won. Nico needed 10 to beat me. I just needed Nico to get 6 more yards, and I'd have had an extra couple $100 in my pocket. But, hey, it is what it is, I guess. Fox says, I started Reed over Higgins, lost by 1 point. Geez, that is rough. I thought Reed would have been a lot better, especially considering... Wait, you started Reed over Higgins? Yeah, well, hold up. Now that I'm actually curious, where the heck did we have them in comparison? Yeah, I had Reed at 17 and Higgins at 18. I had them back to back, yeah. I thought Reed would have had himself a little bit of a better performance, especially after he comes down the field on the first drive and immediately scores a touchdown. I'm thinking, okay, should have a good grade. And then he disappears for the rest of the game. I think in a half PPR, he finished with 8 points, but ridiculous. And then, of course, as we all were wondering, is T. Higgins going to be healthy? Is he going to be at 100% capacity? That has been answered. The question has already been delivered. 25 points. What a ridiculous, turnout. Matt says, I finally start Tillman, and yeah, dude, it's the funniest thing. It's not that like you start Tillman and he passes to Judy. It's that you start Tillman for the first time, and he starts throwing to Judy, he throws to Elijah Moore, and he throws to David Njoku. All 3 of them had monster weeks, and Tillman was the odd man out. I mean, I guess when you have 4 monsters on your offense and you have the kind of, I guess, the uncertainty of Jameis Winston and what he provides every week, there's always going to be a volatility that exists in which your guy is going to get cooked for sure. But yeah, I mean, this was the week in which, unfortunately, in a great matchup, Tillman's the one that goes, missing when everybody else goes feasting. Let's see here. Cameron says, what happened to Hunt? Any value left? No, there's no value left. I mean, again, I think this was a perfect kind of like send off to Kareem Hunt. Even though in terms of fantasy purposes, it wasn't the greatest week, but in terms of efficiency, obviously they've ran him into the ground. And obviously that, the defense for the Buffalo Bills, getting back Matt Milano certainly did make a huge difference. But yeah, going forward, it's going to be the Pacheco show. So not really going to be something that we're too worried about in that scenario. Again, it's going to be Pacheco henceforth. He practiced all of last week. He was inactive mainly because it was a ramp up. Starting this week, he should start, and especially considering they're taking on Carolina, Pacheco should be great for fantasy purposes. We had a super chat sent in from Thomas Dab, and he says, Josh Allen, Chase, Garrett on bye. Okay. What quarterback do I play? Kyler, Baker, Geno, Justin, Tua, Bo, and Stafford is on the waivers. Full PPR. Pacheco is on IR. Got it. Okay, so Pacheco's eventually going to have to come off IR this week, so you're going to have to make some moves in terms of dropping players because I think, you're going to need to have to make some moves to open up space there. If I'm starting one of those potential quarterback options, the number 1 option, in my opinion, is Baker Mayfield against the Giants. Number 2 would be Kyler. Number 3 would be Herbert in this scenario. Those are the 3 that I would... Oh, actually, you have Bo Nix as well. Jeez, Bo Nix against the Raiders is also really good. There are 4 very strong options in that scenario, but I'm leaning towards Baker Mayfield with, Mike Evans coming back here against the Giants. And, the Giants starting Tommy DeVito at quarterback of everybody, So, yeah, I'll take Baker there first and foremost. Otherwise, probably Kyler second. Still, yeah, Justin Herbert. You know what? I'll probably go with Bo third and then Justin Herbert fourth in that scenario. Thank you. Angelo sends in a question. Says, full PPR. I'm currently 6-5. I need a running back. I have Najee Harris, Eckler, Etienne, Braylon Allen. My wide receivers are Nico Collins, Justin Jefferson, Shakir, D-Hop. Propose the trade to a RB-heavy team. They have James Cook, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, and Bucky Irving. Is Khalil for Irving fair? If you're trading away Khalil Shakir to get Irving, yes, I think it's fair, especially considering what Irving has done as of late in terms of his fantasy point contributions. Getting him for the remainder of the season, obviously, I think it favors you, especially in the need of a running back of that caliber. Yes, I'd be willing to make that move. I think that would definitely help you in the long run. Thank you. Auntie Slayer sends in a question, says, I'm currently 9-2 and 8-3 in 2 of my leagues, first overall in both. Thank you, Andrew. No problem. Hey, listen, congratulations. I'm glad everything's working out. I'm telling you that there are going to be sequences in time where you could have had the same team but played in a different schedule and you could have been 6-4. Schedule is a lot of the overall kind of proponent of many of our leagues and our happiness over the course of a season. Sometimes we just, you end up playing against the really good teams. You get a lot of points scored against you rather than points for you, and you get put into a blender. But hey, congratulations. I'm glad it's going well. Bryce Lane says, Texans won me the week. Yeah, listen, hey, I didn't expect defensive touchdowns at that capacity, but we'll take it. We're very happy with it. Keep the Texans defense, though. If I'm not mistaken, let's see here. NFL Week 12. The upcoming schedule for the Texans, this week taking on the Titans. Certainly want to play them within the upcoming performance, so keep them on roster. TanFam sends in a question. So I have Mixon. I scored 140 points and a half PPR total and just lost by 7. That's rough. You see, that's what I'm talking about. That kind of performance, even though you can have yourself 140 points in a 1 QB half PPR league, which is an insane amount of points. And you could still lose. Because again, your schedule. I guarantee you, Tan, you probably beat everybody else this week if you play everybody else. But yeah, that's just the unfortunate nature. That's why I've told you guys, listen, if you want your leagues to be a little bit more serious, the extra component in which you can potentially add it if you suggest this to your commissioner, or if you are the commissioner of your league, I would potentially suggest you doing so, is adding an extra victory and loss every week. And what I mean by that is, besides the head-to-head matchup that you have against a specific team, which again keeps the kind of fun, the shit talking with your friends up, and it can continues to keep it more lively. Besides keeping that, you should also have it to where the top 50% of teams in terms of weekly scoring also get an additional win. And if you're in the bottom 6 or in the bottom half of the league in scoring, you get a loss. So every week you can either go 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2. And it gives you a little bit better of a kind of balance in terms of how you performed, rather than, I played against the best team this week, even though I could have beat everyone else. I lost. I'm going 0-1 instead of 1-1, which certainly could help you advance. All right, we move on to a question that comes in from John Hernandez, who says, I need help. Just lost 110.2 to 109.8 by 0.4 points. You lost by 1 reception, literally. That is rough. Imagine how many drop passes your guys may have had this week. And never mind. Let's forget that. We're moving on, okay? 6-5, let's see here. It says, league mates return with no value in trades. Okay, so basically everybody just wants to win in their trade. So you're basically, you can't even win trades unless they're objectively going to win. Or you can't even make a trade unless the other team's going to objectively win. Either way, looking at your team as it currently stands here, John, you have Jalen Hurts, fantastic. Devon Achane, Christian McCaffrey, which hopefully he's going to finally find himself in the end zone upcoming here, because again, Christian McCaffrey with no touchdowns is something that I'm not certainly used to over the course of his career. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, you have Mark Andrews, you have JSN, which played very well, got himself a lot of target opportunity, which is very exciting to see for the upcoming future. Romo, you have Kraft, you have Burrow, I'm assuming that's B-U-R. You have BTJ, you have Marvin Harrison, you have Trace, you have Estim. Okay. Who do you start? I mean, look, in terms of this upcoming week, Jalen Hurts is automatically your quarterback, I would assume, especially, with the rushing touchdown upside that he provides every single week. It just seems like it's the automatic. Now, that being said, we are in a period of time in which Joe Burrow is in a renaissance of dominating and performing well. But we will talk about that once we get to week 13. As of week 12, again, Burrow is on the bye, so we're not really worried about that. So Jalen Hurts starts at quarterback. Devon Achane is your RB1. Christian McCaffrey is your RB2. Nico Collins is your wide receiver 1. I'd probably, if I'm in your position this week, I'm playing Marvin Harrison as your wide receiver 2. I'm leaving JSN in the flex. I'm keeping, it's a full PPR, half PPR. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave JSN in the flex. I'm putting Marvin Harrison at wide receiver 2. I'm leaving Nico at wide receiver 1. I'm leaving Texans defense. Mark Andrews, who's your other tight end? Kraft had 0 receptions. It was a brutal week there. So you leave Mark Andrews in then at that position, and you potentially change kicker if Austin Seibert's available. Thank you. Moving on to Peyton Whitaker. Peyton says, Lamar is on a 14 bye. Wilson, good option. I mean, I would have thought that the Pittsburgh Steelers would have been a little bit of a better option yesterday. Obviously, the only viable option. I mean, don't get me wrong. George Pickens played relatively well. What was it, 8 catches for 80-plus yards? Fantastic. But Chris Boswell scoring every single offensive point for that team it's just not ideal for us for fantasy purposes. We just don't love that outcome where Chris Boswell is coming away from a week with 24 fantasy points. But if we look at week 14, is Russell Wilson going to be a potentially viable option? Taking on, let's see here, Pittsburgh takes on Cleveland. Well, I guess this week will kind of give you an indicator, right? This upcoming Thursday, they take each other on. It is going to be in Cleveland. I don't know what the weather's going to look like. Somebody in the comment section earlier today was specifically reiterating, Andrew, you might want to be careful with, Jameis and those kind of guys because the weather might be a little bit rough on Thursday. But we'll see how it is in terms of by the time we get to Thursday afternoon, what the weather looks like in Cleveland. But I think today's going to be, or this week is going to be the test as to whether or not Russell Wilson can be a decent option for that week. Because outside of that, maybe Derek Carr against the Giants could be viable, in week 14. Outside of that kind of a scenario, I mean, Aaron Rodgers versus the Dolphins could be okay. Kirk Cousins versus the Vikings could be okay. And maybe if Trevor Lawrence is still active by week 14, if not, Will Levis could be solid. Those are the options that I throw out. But I think it's just going to be a matter of kind of, yes, holding him on roster. Let's see what he's capable of doing this week against Cleveland, and then we'll, adjust going forward. All right, Nathan Salazar sends in a question. Nathan says, in a full PPR, should I trade Kyren Williams away? I'm in the playoffs, and I have Connor as my RB2 and White as my RB3. My wide receivers are all solid. Often is my tight end. Often is your tight end? You mean Kate Otten. There you go. It just auto-corrected. Okay, so Kate Otten is your tight end. So you're solid across the board. You're asking if you should trade away Kyren Williams. Well, if you're going to trade away Kyren Williams, I would only trade him away for a running back. So unless you're going to get a running back in exchange, the answer is probably no. Yeah, so here's the thing. I understand that he has not scored a touchdown in quite a while here, and it is extremely worrisome. But if you were going to trade away Kyren Williams going into the fantasy playoffs, let's see here. Rams schedule. Weeks 15 through 17. We have San Francisco in week 15. Earlier this season, he put out a pretty number against them. He had over 100 total yards and a touchdown. Then he has the Jets, which I think is a very advantageous matchup in that circumstance. And then he has the Arizona Cardinals, which again, even in that game earlier this year, it was a disaster, but it'll be a little bit different this time around. As a whole, if you were going to trade him away, I don't mind the idea of doing so, just as long as you get a comparable running back in return. Now, again, it's going to be difficult to move him considering the most recent performances of only 10 fantasy points because people are going to think, oh, well, he's only a 10 fantasy point prospect. But quite frankly, we know he's better than that. He should be a 15 to 20 point guy every week. That's what he should be, especially considering the lack of touchdowns as of late. It really hasn't helped. But yeah, if you're going to move him, you'd have to get a running back in exchange. As to who you're potentially getting in exchange, I mean, at this point, at very least, it has to be like a James Cook or a David Montgomery. It has to, at very least, be that kind of caliber of player. Outside of those kind of potential prospects, maybe somebody's trying to sell, quote unquote, sell high on Breece Hall, even though I don't know if it's a sell high matter. Maybe Jonathan Taylor, something of that exchange could be available for you. Thank you. All right, moving on to Peyton, who had also said happy birthday. Thank you, Peyton. Okay, good one, man. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see here. We had a question that came in from Aiden. Aiden says, what wide receivers would you look to trade Tracy for? Already have Barkley, Pacheco, and Chase Brown. Also, Nico for Neighbors plus Tracy full PPR. Okay, so you would theoretically be trading Neighbors and Tracy and getting Nico in exchange for the late term, long road ahead. Yes, I'd take the trade. I'll take Nico Collins there very happily. If you're not going to make that kind of caliber of a trade, I'd go after Mike Evans right now. If you can do that and get him in exchange 1-for-1, I'd also take that very happily. But if you can make this Nico Collins trade happen, I'd be very happy doing so. Thank you. Brandon DeCoste sends in a question. Says, traded Cook for Aaron Jones because of the bye week. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, again, you're trying to still make the playoffs. So any trade that you can potentially make in order to get yourself one step closer to making said playoffs, you got to do it. So as of right now, absolutely. Yeah, I have no issue with this trade at all. Do I feel confident in the idea of playing Aaron Jones this upcoming week? Well, here's the thing about the Minnesota Vikings. They should have a pretty solid matchup on the ground, specifically because they take on the Bears. But the issue that I have is that this offense and this team as a whole just hasn't looked great as of late. They were in jeopardy of messing around to potentially lose that game yesterday. Yesterday pretty much, yeah. So even though it didn't seem like, the score at the end of the game, they were in danger. They did not start off great at all. And there's been a lot of utilization going in the direction of Cam Akers, which scares me. But as a whole, again, trying to take one step closer to hopefully capturing a victory. And if that's the trade you have to make, so be it, as long as it gets you one step closer. Cowboys 9511 says, is Jake Ferguson droppable? I mean, at this point, if, in fact, you need to pick up a tight end in order to replace him because he's going to be on concussion this upcoming week. Again, he's going to be in the protocol. So with that consideration, I would say, yes, he is droppable if you're in need of picking up another tight end. But if you're going to drop, or if you can just place him on your IR spot when he is given the out designation, go for it. But if you need to drop him in order to make sure you get a tight end off of waivers, then yes, I'm okay doing so. Sean Trevino sends in a question. Says, send BTJ and Hunt for Pickens. Thoughts? I mean, that is incredible. I don't understand how you guys get away with some of these trades. That in itself is robbery, but congratulations. And it says, tough loss this week. Need a lineup help. Okay, very well. You have Knicks, you have Anthony Richardson, you have Christian. Okay, so between Knicks and Anthony Richardson this week, I'm playing Knicks. Christian McCaffrey, HN are your 1-2. Easy to go. I see that you have Bucky on your team. Bucky's going to be playing alongside Tracy within your flex. And then you're probably playing well, it depends on the weather. On Thursday, we'll have to wait and see, but you're probably going to play Pickens alongside of Debo, I would assume. Yeah, that's probably the way I go. But actually, you know what? Now that I look at your roster, Sean, it's probably Knicks, Christian McCaffrey, HN, and then your two wide receivers are Debo, Pickens, and then you're flexing Bucky and Zay. I think you're benching Tracy this week. I think. But that is just the current thought process of how we would go about it. Raghav sends in a question. Raghav, where is your question? I see it. It says, part 1. 10-team, full PPR, 6-5. Top 4 make the playoffs, currently in 5th. My team is quarterback Love and Wilson. Okay. We have running backs Achane, Jacobs, Connor, Tracy, ETN. Wide receivers are Jamar, who's on a bye, Debo, Kupp, Myers, Dobbs. Tight end is Kittle and Ingram. Okay. Part 2, playing 4th place this week. Okay. So you're playing the 4th place guys. So pretty much you can leapfrog him with a win here, potentially. Who has Baker, Christian McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Pickens, Neighbors, Hawkinson, Lad McConkey, Boswell. Not feeling good about Debo. Must win week because top 2 are far ahead. Understood. What should I do? Okay, so here's the thing. Considering you're in a must-win scenario, I think if your trade deadline is not surpassed already and you could potentially still make a move, Jamar Chase has got to be on the block. You've got to be looking to move him. If you're in a scenario in which you are past your trade deadline and you cannot make any moves, then again, you're just starting your studs. You're starting Jordan Love, Achane, Jacobs, Connor in the flex. You're going to roll out with Debo in Kupp and, Kittle hopefully coming back this week, and you just let it ride. But if you're in the business of potentially still having a opportunity to make trades, then you're taking Jamar Chase and you're trading him for a top tier option. Because again, he is played as the number 1 wide receiver this season. So what do I want in exchange? I want players that are very much so comparable in that conversation. If somebody wants to go ahead and send over like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, thank you. Puka Nacua, thank you. Anybody that is past their bye week isn't going to have a bye week up ahead and can provide you value at a top tier level. Justin Jefferson, potentially AJ Browns of the world, Nico Collins. I will take any of them. As long as I can potentially put them in your starting lineup and help you beat this upcoming matchup and get you one step closer and potentially leapfrog them into the top 4 category. It may hurt you for the long term making this deal because again, you are going to get a lesser wide receiver in return because Jamar's been incredible. But I mean, at this point, you kind of have to make that kind of a move if you are in this position. Or you can just say, hey, cross my fingers, hope this team balls out and we don't make any trades. I mean, I guess it's just up to you as to whether or not you can find a trading partner for that capacity. Because again, everybody in your league is still trying to make it to the top 4, right? So trading with you and taking Jamar Chase, the only people that would probably be willing to kind of entertain that idea is the top 2 teams. And if they're not willing to do it, I don't think anybody else would. All right, we move on to a question that comes in. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. We took care of that. Oh, okay, well, my YouTube just crashed. I got to close all these tabs before. All right, let's reload this page. Okay, here we go. Okay, we had a question that came in from Emily Doyle. It says, hi, Andrew. My tight ends are Kincaid and Ferguson. Obviously, I need a tight end. Should I pick up Jonnu Smith, Disley, Taysom, or Ertz? Okay, so I think you should pick up 2 of these options. If I was in your position, considering Kincaid was designated quote-unquote out this week, if you can put him on your IR spot, because going into the bye week, he's still going to be given the out designation, you might be able to keep him remaining within your IR spot. Otherwise, you're dropping Ferguson for sure. Now, I would say immediately I want to pick up Taysom Hill for rest of season purposes, but considering he is on a bye week this week and you're in need of a starter this week, we're probably looking elsewhere. If I'm going to potentially suggest one of those 3 options, the primary would be Jonnu Smith that I'm going after. He played relatively well against the New England Patriots earlier this season, and I would assume that he could potentially have himself another solid game, especially off of the most recent performances that he has had. So Jonnu's a solid play. If in the event in which you're not able to get him, I think the next best option in that scenario for this week in specific would be Disley against the Ravens, because again, they have struggled against tight ends. So either of those two in that order. Otherwise, if you can, leave Kincaid there, maybe open up 2 roster spots by dropping Ferguson and pick up Taysom in one of them for the future. Thank you. God's Gang sends in a question, says, I was worried about ETN being in a blowout despite me going with him over Najee. I squeaked out a W. Yeah, listen, the ETN train or the ETN excitement of old is gone. It's crazy how you can go from being like an RB1 one season and just being an unstoppable force. It wasn't even that he was an RB1, is that he was a top 5 running back by the end of the 2023 season. And in the next year, he is completely unstartable. And yeah, I mean, it is crazy. Completely unstartable. But I'm glad to see that you were able to still pick up a victory there. Let's see here. He won by less than a half of a point and you had Aubrey. Dude, be careful with Aubrey, man. I'm telling you, be very careful. He would have had an extra 5 points there if it wasn't for the head slap. But man, it's always sketchy, especially when teams want to, when teams like the Cowboys or any team that is really going to be in a negative game script for the entire rest of the season. For example, let's say the Carolina Panthers, they're always going to be more inclined to go forward on 4th down rather than kick field goals when they're down 3-4 scores, right? So oftentimes you're not going to be able to find much value within their kicking options. Auntie Slater says, Tyquan Thornton, value rest of the season for the Chiefs? Absolutely not. Nope. Listen, Chiefs wide receivers are already difficult enough to predict, much less adding some other extra variable that really we have no control over. I don't expect him to see a single reception. Maybe he catches the ball 4 times in the next 4 weeks tops. That's my prediction on that. Cowboys 9511 says, would you hold Jaden Reed or trade him? I mean, I'm still holding on to him. I still think that the upcoming schedule, I mean, again, this most recent performance against the Bears, we all knew that it was already going to be a difficult matchup, taking on Kyler Gordon, their primary nickel cornerback. We knew it was going to be difficult, but going forward, I don't mind what the Green Bay Packers have ahead of them, especially considering majority of these matchups should be potential shootouts. When you take on the idea of, okay, their upcoming schedule is San Francisco. I mean, again, both these teams should be competing at a high level. Miami, Detroit, Seattle, Saints, and then the Vikings. I feel like all those games could theoretically be shootouts. So I'm keeping it for now. Joseph Weintraub sends in a question. Says, Andrew, I already clinched the playoffs. Starting Purdy, Gibbs, Bucky, Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Neighbors, Taysom, benches JSN, Laporta, Brooks, Benson. What waiver moves would you make? Happy birthday. Thank you very much. Okay, Joseph. So here's the deal. If you've already made the playoffs, are you preparing for week 15 or week 16? If you're saying, hey, listen, I've clutched the playoffs, and we're just looking towards week 15 because I'm not able to get a first round bye or there's no first round buys in my league. If we're just specifically looking to week 15, I mean, really, it's just a matter of playing the matchups in that circumstance and trying to get yourself a little bit more of an advantage there. So, for example, week 15, Purdy versus the Rams. I have no issue with that at all. Last time out, again, he threw 3 touchdowns to Juwan Jennings alone. So that's a pretty good play for him. Then you have Gibbs, again, always a stud. Bucky's going to be fantastic. When we look at their matchup specifically, again, even though the Lions take on the Bills should be an exciting matchup, I would still implicate, Gibbs to have himself a solid week there. Bucky Irving and the boys will take on the Chargers, which again, is that week 15 or week 14? That is week 15. I think that's a solid matchup. Again, he's going to continue to play well. Pickens is going to be solid. Garrett Wilson, let's see, what does Garrett Wilson have to take on that week? They take on the Jaguars, that's fine. Pickens and the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Eagles. Maybe that is the only difficult matchup. I think that is the only issue that I would potentially have in this scenario that would be it. It'd be Pickens versus the Eagles. If their number 1 cornerback is going to lock him down, just like they did to Terry McLaurin earlier this week, that would be my only fear. So am I making any waiver moves? No. But am I making potential moves to maybe make a trade? If there's still a trade deadline that hasn't surpassed, maybe I'm looking towards maybe moving that before we get to week 15. Peyton Whitaker says, do you think if Wilson flops, Winston an option? I mean, look, Winston's always going to be an option that is either going to carry your team in the week or going to bury you. He's either going to throw 3 touchdowns or throw 3 picks. So you have to be willing to, live and die by the Winston. And quite frankly, I don't know if I'm comfortable enough going in that direction I'd have to get more confidence from him getting more consistent production rather than one game good, one game off, one game good, one game off. That's not going to cut it for me. TanFam says, please go back to my previous super chat. 2 parts. 2 parts? Did you type something in the live chat or something, Tan? Okay, so you had asked, okay, so you said blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you said Mixon. You lost. Should I pick up this? Okay. Anthony Richardson to it. Oh, okay. I didn't even see the second part. I went on a tangent. My bad. If we're replacing, apologies, Tan. If we're replacing this week, let's see here, week 12. Okay. So the way that I would go about this, I'd play Tua this week. I'm either playing Tua or I'm playing Drake May. That's one of the two that I'm playing. But I prefer Tua in the current circumstance. Thank you. Okay, let's see here. All right, really quickly, let me just check this out. Perfect. Okay. So we continue on. Scrolling down the list. Who else was next? After TanFam, we had Shannon Yoon, who says, which quarterback rest of season? Bo, Kyler, Baker, 6 point per passing touchdown. Okay. Give me a moment here. Let me go ahead and pull up the rest. Okay, look, the rest of season conversation is very dependent on 2 specific factors. First and foremost, are we looking the entire season, the full spectrum of weeks 12 through 17, or are we looking at just the fantasy playoffs? So it's just a matter of really of, have you made the playoffs yet? If you have not made the playoffs yet, I think objectively the answer is Baker Mayfield. If you are going to already make the playoffs, I would say that in that overall circumstance, I'm probably playing Kyler Murray in week 15 and 16 for sure. So, and then if we're talking about the full expansion of the entire window itself, I would then lean towards Baker. Thank you. Twisted Folk sends in a question. Twisted Folk says, I scored 178.84 and a half PPR this week with St. Brown, Bowers, and Boswell at the top. Wow. Congratulations, man. That is ridiculous. And then also prefer Detroit or Denver defense the next 2 weeks. Let me look at their upcoming schedules here. So if I look at their upcoming schedules, Detroit and Denver. Okay. So Detroit has Indianapolis and they have Chicago. And then Denver has Las Vegas. And honestly, I like them both. If I was to tell you which one I specifically prefer, I would rather have Detroit's defense, honestly. That's the one I would prefer to have at the moment. Yeah, I will take Detroit's defense. Because besides just the next 2 weeks, I think the rest of the season they could be started. But that's a completely different thing. And Denver also has a week 14 bye. So you can take Detroit's defense and just ride them into the playoffs if you like. But yes, I still prefer Detroit in that circumstance. All right, Denon had sent in a question. Nothing attached to Denon. Where are you at? Let me remove this. Nope, that's not what I want to do. Control F, Denon. All right, Denon, where art thou? Denon says, was trading Debo and Downs for J.K. Dobbins and JSN a good trade, or did I get fleeced? Worsen my chances for the playoffs. I think if you need running back depth, I think it's perfectly fine. Again, the Chargers are past their bye week. This upcoming week, they do have the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, but it is a revenge game. We're going to hope that, of course, how great the Chargers have played as a whole is going to continue to lead to J.K. Dobbins finding the end zone. I don't think that it's a total mistake at all. Again, when Downs is associated with Anthony Richardson, when the going gets tough, and especially they have tougher matchups in comparison to what the Jets provided, it will be a little bit more difficult for him to find that touchdown upside. But as of right now, I don't mind the trade at all, especially where JSN is trending in terms of his opportunity as of late. I think it's very much so a positive trend. All right, let's see here. We scroll to Adam Sim, who sends in a question, says, happy birthday, Andrew. Thank you. Says, full PPR, Montgomery or Debo? I mean, at this point, okay. Montgomery is probably guaranteed 14 points. If you believe that you can pass up on 14 points, then you play Debo Samuel. I don't know what my projection model is going to say. I'm going to assume that I would probably have Debo Samuel in the range of that kind of point total, considering what he is capable of and what he has produced this season and the upcoming matchup against Green Bay. But in the same vein, I mean, again, it's very difficult to pass up on 14 points with the potential, like, Montgomery presented this week, of getting 20 plus points. The reason why I specifically say 14 points is because over the course of the season, in 8 of the last 10 games he has played, he has had himself 70 minimum yards and 1 touchdown. So if you're going to get yourself 70 plus the extra 6, that's 13 points. Maybe you catch a ball in a full PPR, you're getting 14 points there. Which again, I think at that point, Adam, it's kind of hard to pass up on because it's just a guarantee. Like Montgomery touchdown is every week. Every now and then you won't find it, but quite frankly, it is hard to pass up on, especially when you take on Indianapolis Colts. So I'd probably just go with Montgomery there to be safe. A. Chavez sends in a question, says, Spears concussion, Tony Pollard manager saved? For a week here, yeah, maybe. I mean, look, considering the upcoming matchup, okay, you may be saved because of that primarily. The absence of Tyjae Spears, I don't know if that's the biggest difference maker as to whether or not Tony Pollard is going to be given more opportunity. But again, the upcoming matchup against the Texans, it's not great. But maybe if he catches the ball a couple more times here or there, he'll still be of a higher potential for opportunity. As of right now, he's still going to be a low-end RB2, regardless of whether or not Tyjae Spears is available. All right, we scroll down. We have Rogo who sends in a question, says, Sup, Brody? We won. Looking to hoard Denver. Okay, very well. Anyone droppable? Chubb? Question mark. Same. Okay, let's see here. Looking to hoard Denver. Anyone droppable? Chubb? Question mark. Standard half PPR. We have Bo, Baker, Debo, Sutton, Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper, Higgins, Gibbs, David Montgomery, Swift, Chubb, Otten, Jonnu, and Moody. Okay, so in your current circumstance, considering Cade Otton is back, I would assume that you start him every week henceforth. And in that event, you would theoretically drop Jonnu Smith. So in that scenario, if you're looking to potentially drop somebody, it's Jonnu Smith. Because looking at your team with Gibbs and Montgomery, those are going to be your starters rest of season. You could drop Chubb. I think you could very comfortably, but I don't think you have to. I don't mind always having extra running back depth just in case of an injury upcoming. Thank you. All right, we continue on with a question from Andrew Solis. Says, check normal chat for question. Happy birthday. Thank you. Okay. Andrew Solis says, Hurts, Josh Jacobs, Bijan, Tyrone Tracy, Mostert, Bucky, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Josh Downs, Wan'Dale Robinson, Goddard, Kincaid, 49ers defense, and Justin Tucker, full PPR, most likely will make the playoffs. What moves would you make? Okay, so under the assumption that you can still make trades, okay? Jalen Hurts, Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson do not move. I think Tyrone Tracy could theoretically be moved. I mean, you have Bucky as well. Dude, you've got like a perfect combo of running backs. I don't think they need to move at all. I mean, if anything, Mostert probably gets dropped, and maybe you go and pick up somebody else for an upcoming bye week in order to fill in. But in the long run, Josh Jacobs has a top 5 matchup for the fantasy playoffs. The schedule there is ridiculous. Bijan has played well. Obviously, they took a vacation week in Denver. They took a sabbatical there. They didn't want to really do anything competitive. But Tracy and Bucky are going to be great in the absence of Bijan with the upcoming bye week. I think running back is really solid there. Maybe if you want to trade a 2-for-1, you could, but that would require like moving Tracy with one of your wide receivers in order to potentially get a wide receiver in return. And in that circumstance, kind of improve on what Devontae Adams is doing. Like maybe you can, like at this point, what Devontae Adams has been producing, maybe you can take Tracy and Devontae Adams and go after Mike Evans. I think you might be able to actually get it. And at that point, just start him rest of the way. If somebody in your league is super doubtful on Tyreek Hill, I think that's something that you could also explore. Again, he's getting better. Again, you got to give it time. He's a stud wide receiver. But as of right now, is there any moves that I'm making objectively? I think your running backs and quarterbacks are solid. Tight end is a little bit of an issue in my mind. But again, unless you're going to move a player like Tyrone Tracy, which again, I think is your primary moving piece, your primary kind of advantage point, unless you're going to move him for a tight end or move him along with the wide receiver for an upgraded wide receiver, I don't think you have to make any changes here. Potentially hitting the waiver wire may be of your best interest for tight end. Maybe somebody like Will Dissly's available there. Could be something that you might want to look forward and look into. Andrew Solis, do me a favor and type in the live chat. Tell me, is your trade deadline already surpassed, or can you potentially even go make those trades for like a Mike Evans? Thank you. Terry R sends in a question. Says in a full PPR, best play, JSN, Debo, Bucky. As of this week, in a full PPR, it makes it a little bit tricky, but I'm playing Bucky Irving this week. Like, there's a reason why I've talked about him for, half of a month straight for the last 2.5 weeks. I'm all in on the Bucky Irving train. On top of that, your next question, Dissly or Otten? I'm going to play Otten there. Dissly's going to get himself opportunity, but again, from what we have seen based on his averages over the course of the last month of the season, he's going to get himself 5 to 6 targets. He'll catch 5 or 6 receptions within the week, but the touchdown is very much so difficult for me to potentially predict in that scenario, even against the Ravens, which is a great matchup. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, let me pull this up. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, like when I look at Cade Otton and the potential target, volume he's gotten, even though this most recent performance against the 49ers wasn't the greatest game, he still got himself 5 catches, 35. So if you put him against the Giants in a one-sided affair there, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable going with Otton in that scenario. Sola says this week is the deadline. Yeah, so if you're still in the if you're still in a position to where you can trade and you can get a player of the caliber of a Mike Evans, then I'm exploring that possibility because I want a solidified wide receiver 2. I don't believe that the wide receiver 2 on your team, Adams, DJ Moore, Josh Downs. I guess Josh Downs as of late has been more of the reliable RB2 wide receiver 2 amongst all, but I don't think that they're going to be able to pull their weight in the long run. So I'm looking to potentially try to make a move in order to get a solidified wide receiver. Only because, again, you specifically have the ability to do so. No need, there's not really a necessity to have to make a trade, but considering the depth you have on roster, I want to see if you can explore it and see if potentially there's a possibility of somebody being interested. Thank you. Jayville sends in a question. Jayville, where is your question, dude? Jayville. Says questions in the chat. Need 2 wide receivers due to buy. I have Pittman, Waddle, and Tillman. Who should I pick up on waivers or start? Okay, so I'm not starting Pittman. I'm not starting Waddle. I could consider Tillman, but depending on what is available. So when you say who should I pick up, like who's available? Because that's really the question. Are the players that I mentioned in today's waiver wire episode available? Now the additional question to that is, are players that should not be available? For example, is Quentin Johnston available? Is Jerry Jeudy available? Is Rome Odunze available? Is Christian Watson available? Are those players who are typically rostered in more than 50% of sleeper Yahoo leagues, are they available? If they're available, then it makes it a little bit of a different conversation point. More context on the matter if you type it in the live chat, Jayville, would be appreciated. God's Gang says, would you rather trade away Otton or Hawkinson? That's a really good question. Hawkinson, had a couple of drop passes here and there over the course of this game. In terms of long-term expectation of upside, between the two of them, like when I look at the upcoming schedule for Cade Otton taking on New York Giants, Carolina, Las Vegas, like that is as good as it gets for the tight end position. So going forward, I'm probably going to be starting him over Hawkinson. Now, I do know that Josh Oliver did sustain an injury this most recent game. So if Josh Oliver is going to miss time, it could lead to even more receiving upside. Let me see what Josh Oliver's injury consists of. Josh Oliver, questionable. What did he sustain? It says on Monday, Coach O'Connell said he sprained his ankle during the... Yeah, so if he's going to miss a couple weeks here with an ankle sprain, it opens up even more opportunity because if we look at the target counts from Josh Oliver the last 3 games, 5, 6, and 3, leading to 5, 4, and 3 catches, that's a lot of workload that could go in the direction of Hawkinson. If I'm going to trade away one of the two, if I'm still trying to make the playoffs, I'm keeping Otton. If I'm looking for the long-term value, I'm keeping Hawkinson all the way to the fantasy championship, into the fantasy playoffs. And I would trade the opposite. Matt sends in a question, says trade away Henry or he's balling despite schedule. I mean, look, he's balling despite schedule. That's just the fact of the matter. The production that Derrick Henry has put forth is legendary. I want you all to understand that what we are witnessing on a weekly basis over the course of this season from Derrick Henry is ridiculous. He is averaging 6 yards per carry, but not only that, if you compare this season to his 2020 season in which he had 2,000 rushing yards with the Titans, he is ahead of schedule on, in terms of the overall rushing attempts, he has like 60 less rushing attempts and only 70 less rushing yards. He has just as many touchdowns within that year. Like Derrick Henry's, he's going to do it. At this point, I don't see myself shipping him off unless I'm getting, 2 massive starters in return. Like if someone wants to turn around and give me Jahmyr Gibbs and Puka Nacua, by all means, let's go ahead and make that trade. But unless a massive deal where I cannot refuse it comes on my doorstep and, is very much so, peacefully offered to me with no I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. My brain's fried. If there's no back channel collusion that they're giving you these great players for, I'll give you this player for Henry, and I'll get you give me 20. As long as there's nothing like that going on, then we're good. I'll take it. Otherwise, we're keeping it rolling. Unless you can get Saquon, which I think that would be a pretty good upgrade. All right, let's see here. Ron the Don says Ricky Pearsall or Elijah Moore in a PPR. I'm going to assume that because Kittle's going to be active this week, I'm going to stick away from Pearsall. So I'd go with Elijah Moore there. Let's see here. Frosty is talking to somebody else. Nick Graham in the chat says, Superflex, half PPR dynasty. Is it worth dropping Russell Wilson to pick up Anthony Richardson? Yes, in a dynasty, it absolutely is, without a doubt in my mind. Now, is it going to get you closer to capturing a fantasy championship? I can't guarantee that. So, but still, even with that situation, I would take the pickup. I would still go and get him. Because if he's going to be the starter for that team henceforth, the skill, the talent that he has for fantasy purposes is as good as it gets. As long as he puts it together within the passing game, he'll be fine. Let's see here. Mob says, I lost by 1 point because CeeDee Lamb sitting out on the last drive. That's rough, man. That is extremely rough. Sorry to hear that. Luis Garcia says, I went over 500 with a 0.84 point difference. Wow. That is ridiculous. Joseph Mai says, hi, guys. Who should I go with rest of the season? Kicker, Bates, McLaughlin, Elliott, Sanders, Hopkins, Carlson, or McPherson? That's a really good question. I think, what does Jake Bates do this most recent week? Let's hear. I mean, like, they're blowing out everyone, but going forward, the matchups are going to be a little bit more competitive, I would assume, to where, I think it's Jake Bates that you keep. Especially with the upcoming schedule with a lot of home games. Like, they're in Indianapolis this week. It's not a home game, but it's an indoor stadium. Beautiful. Then they have Chicago at home, Green Bay at home, Buffalo at home. Week 16 is the only worry because it's in Chicago, which again, the weather could impact it. But then there's week 17 in San Francisco, which again, the weather should be nice, even in December at that point. So as of right now, I'm keeping Jake Bates. Not too much weather concerns going forward, no bye weeks, and of course, has been playing well within a great offense. Let's see here. We had a question that came in from Rogo, who says, do you think Jonnu has same/equal to week 11 upside rest of season? No, he does not have week 11 upside every week. Again, what did he just do? He went for like 100 yards and a touchdown, right? Like, I don't think that kind of level of production, 2 touchdowns, my apologies. I don't think 25 points is going to be a common, circumstance. But if what we have seen over the course of the season, and specifically as of late, as of right now, for all intents and purposes, he's the number 3 receiving option behind Tyreek Hill, Achane, and then it's him because he's getting more workload and he's getting more upside than Jalen Waddle. So as long as this is going to stay persistent, the upcoming matchups, again, there's no bye weeks. They should be shootouts. They should be throwing the ball for majority of games, considering the running game has not been efficient with the offensive line deficiencies. Again, he's going to be solid, but is he going to be this kind of upside? TBD. I don't think 25 points is a common output, but I think he still will be a startable tight end going forward for sure. Luke C says PPR. I have Jalen Hurts. I have Josh Jacobs. I have Brian Robinson Jr. And I have McBride. Question number 1. Trade Anthony Richardson / Kincaid for Bucky. Yes, immediately, no questions asked. The deal is done. It is on my table and it is being processed. Moving on to number 2. Who's your top 5 buy low league winning running backs? Buy low is a very, very slippy word. There's a lot of implications in regards to quote unquote buy low. Okay. The thing is, the running back position is all about when you get to the fantasy playoffs, are they healthy? And then additionally on top of that, can they actually produce in the great matchups that they have? Now, if we're specifically talking about the fantasy playoffs, because that is what I'm precisely preparing for. Like I talked about last week, and I'll continue to say, and I said it last week, and I said it the week before, and I will continue to harp on it. I want James Conner, I want Bucky Irving, and I want Tyrone Tracy. I truly do believe when it's all said and done, when we get into the fantasy playoffs, those are the guys that I want. And those are, you're buying them low off of last week's bye week. If you're not able to get them last week and now they're playing, it's not going to be easy to buy them. Because otherwise, the easiest strength of schedules going forward for the fantasy playoffs is the Eagles, the Packers, and the Falcons. Those 3 running backs are impossible to get already. Then you have the Saints. You're not going to get Kamara. You have the Bills, James Cook, unless you're buying him on his bye week, impossible. The Vikings are up there. Aaron Jones could be a potential buy low option, taking on Chicago, Seattle, and Green Bay in that circumstance. Then you have Baltimore. You're not trading for him. Then you have Tampa Bay. You're not trading for him. You could try to go after a guy like Jonathan Taylor coming off of a lackluster performance, but he does have an upcoming bye weeks, which again, if that's going to be an impactful negative for you, then you don't go for it. I think the most immediate players that are quote-unquote buy low options at running back are Aaron Jones and Kyren Williams. Those are the 2. Outside of that, if the other names that I just mentioned, specifically Bucky Irving and James Conner, are not within the realm of possibility of trading for, The answer is Aaron Jones, Kyron Williams, and probably Jonathan Taylor. But again, buy low. They're associated. I mean, these are the top of the tier. These are the cream of the crop. These are the blue chip running backs. Like the name value itself is so it's going to be tough to trade for them. I know it objectively. All right, moving on to Mo Money, who says PPR. Quarterback is Burrow. Wide receivers are CeeDee Lamb, Hill, and Adams, and Nakua, Hopkins, Devontae Smith. My running backs are Taylor, Jacobs, Montgomery, Mason. Tight end is Hawkinson and Ingram. Who should I target and who should I trade away? Okay. Burrow is fine, but you need to pick up another potential quarterback this week. As to what we are doing to make sure that it occurs, we are dropping Mason and we're picking up a quarterback. Now, as for who we are giving away and potentially trying to go after, the wide receivers on your team that I want to keep rest of season is Hill and Nakua. I am willing to ship off CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Hopkins, and Devontae Smith. All four of those should be on the block. The issue is Adams, Hopkins, and Devontae Smith have not played well, so they will be very difficult to trade away in this circumstance. So that leaves you with the potential of Lamb, which you could theoretically trade away, which, I mean, if I was in your position, I'd be looking to potentially do so, especially considering there's always the possibility that they swap quarterbacks to Trey Lance later in the year, which is not the greatest scenario if it was to occur, especially for his fantasy upside. But let's say you weren't even willing to trade him. Let's say you wanted to keep CeeDee Lamb, Hill, Nakua, because you want to make sure that you have all three of these guys all past their bye week, still trying to push for the playoffs. You're moving Adams, Hopkins, and Devontae Smith, and you're trying to see if there's a potential and a conversation to be had in which Mike Evans can be brought onto your team. If that is not a player that could potentially be brought on, Jaden Reed is another player that I'm very much so interested in trading for at this current moment. I'd also continue the conversation with potentially going after Drake London, considering he is on a bye week. Because again, with a bye week, there may be a desperate team in your league in which maybe they're like, well, you know what? I really need a wide receiver this week in order to help me get closer to making the fantasy playoffs. I'm willing to ship him off. If you can find teams that are desperate, that are missing players because of the bye-apocalypse, again, a reminder for those of you who are not aware, the Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jaguars, Saints, and Jets are on bye. So maybe even in your case, it may be difficult to make some moves there. If you could trade for Bengals receivers, I mean, obviously we're looking to try to do that. But again, I think Drake London would be easier to accomplish in that circumstance. But yeah, Reed, Evans, players like that. That's what I want to try to go after. Other than that, I think Taylor and Jacobs are relatively strong. Montgomery's strong. You don't really have to move any of those options unless someone wants to give you another, unless someone wants to give you, like if you have Jonathan Taylor, well, no, they're not going to give you James Conner for it. I'll take James Conner for it though. If someone wants to give you James Conner for Jonathan Taylor, I'll take, and I'll be happy and I'll run to the hills. Thank you. I got potential sends in a question. Says Kyler or Bo Nix rest of the season. Alrighty, let's see here. Let's look at their schedule in terms of rest of season really quickly, so I have a reference point. So if we look at the QB rest of season strength of schedule as it stands for the remainder of the year, as it currently stands, if we look at this schedule, let me filter it to this. So rest of season, technically Denver has the better strength of schedule. Is it significantly better? I'd say no. Wait, hold up. No, actually Arizona has the better schedule. But they're back to back. They're literally both tied at 14.36 in my metrics. So as it currently stands, considering we have a Bo Nix bye week in week 14, I'd rather just have Kyler at this point. Especially considering he has Seattle each of the last or 2 of the next 3 weeks. I'm okay with that. Now, if you can keep them both on roster, again, once Kyler in week 13 has that matchup against Minnesota, I'd probably be willing to kind of swap back to playing Bo Nix in week 13, and then potentially go back to Bo Nix in week 17. But if you have to keep one, it's probably Kyler. Thank you. How can I check fantasy playoff strength of schedule? So last week, in every single video that I posted, running back, wide receiver, and tight end / quarterback, at the end of every video, I shared the rest of season strength of schedule for all the positions. So again, at the end of the running back video, we talked about weeks 15 through 17 there. So last week's videos is where you would find that. Otherwise, you can just straight ask me and I'll convey what is on screen. At least what I have. Let's see here. Where are we at? Okay. We have some questions here. What does it say? Half PPR. My team is Allen, Connor, JT, and Saquon. Garrett Wilson, Pickens, and Reed. Kincaid and Andrews are my tight end. Do I trade JT, Wilson, Andrews for Kupp, Metcalf, and Kittle? What moves should I make? Okay, so if you were going to trade away Jonathan Taylor, if you got back Kupp, Metcalf, and Kittle, I'm actually not opposed to that trade at all. I actually do not mind that. As a whole, in a half PPR, like I understand losing JT is rough, but you have Saquon and Connor who are going to start as your RB1 and 2 rest of season. Then you pretty much get a massive upgraded wide receiver with Kupp and Metcalf, which are both past their bye weeks. And you get Kittle, who hopefully is healthy and is a massive upgrade. Honestly, I don't mind the trade at all. Especially where the Jets are trending. I don't mind that. BB Walrus says, trade Achane for Bijan. I don't have an issue with that. If you're okay losing out on Achane this week, because again, Bijan's going on bye this week and you're not going to have him available. If you're okay with that, I don't have an issue with that at all. I would like to have Bijan for that fantasy playoff slate if that's what you're preparing for. Let's see here. What does that say? It says Estime, Edwards, Benson, or Ford. At this point, Estime is never to be named again. That is the final time that I will say his name. Otherwise, we will reference him as he who shall not be named. Because, Sean Payton decides to play with our fantasy teams with the words that he says and the actions that he commits to. But as for the potential pickups for this week, Cal, I'd rather have Benson more than anybody on that list. If I had to start one of these players in a full PPR, I'm probably starting Ford, though. Ethan says Kyler or Goff rest of season. The issue with Goff, well, honestly, Kyler kind of has the same issue, doesn't he? Would I rather have Goff or would I rather... look, when I look at the schedule for the Lions, okay, Indianapolis, they should buzzsaw through. Chicago, they should buzzsaw through. Green Bay should be competitive. Buffalo, competitive. Chicago, again, considering Week 16 is a weather game that is very unfortunate. Outdoors, maybe, snow. Week 16 could be a disaster. Then you get to Week 17, San Francisco. A lot of those back-end games against Buffalo, Green Bay, and San Francisco, specifically in that fantasy playoff stretch, there should be competitive games. So it shouldn't all be rushing. It should be a mix and a blend where Jared Goff is continuing to continue to play well. But if you're playing in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, the safer option is Kyler because of the rushing upside that he presents every week. So yeah, I'd probably prefer Kyler ever so slightly. If it was a 6-point, it would just automatically be Goff at that point. Brandon Dorcas says, PPR, who are we taking rest of season? Ingram, Laporta, Taysom. Which two should I roster? As of right now, it's okay. So there's different ways we can go about this. Considering we don't know the status of Laporta's shoulder, that makes it a huge question mark. And considering you're going into this week with Ingram on bye and Taysom on bye, you're gonna have to roster Laporta, right? So if all three of them are out, you're gonna have to go get another potential tight end, which then means you have to drop two of these players because you said specifically which two would you roster. Immediately, I'm thinking I'd rather have Taysom Hill and Ingram rest of season. But if I'm going to be in a situation where I can't roster any of them because all of them are out this week, then really I'm just holding on to Ingram and I'm dropping the rest and I'm just picking up whatever I can. Thank you. What wide receiver should I go after? I have Drake London. If you're trading away Drake London, the wide receiver caliber that you should be looking to potentially get in exchange, as of right now, let's see week 12. I want to see because I honestly you would make this trade because you're looking for a player that doesn't have an upcoming bye week and additionally is going to provide you enough value to have sustainability for the remainder of the season. So in that circumstance, who are some players that we are potentially trading for? If Nico Collins is available to trade for, you make the move. If there is a potential in which Tyreek Hill is on the table, you trade for it. If there is a potential in which you can get Mike Evans, you trade for it. If there is a potential in which you can get what else is there? Is there anything? I'd be willing to even go after Courtland Sutton this week because, again, you are moving him to try to win this week outright. Courtland's been incredible over the course of the last month. Deebo Samuel could be adventured, but again, it's sketchy. Marvin Harrison could be adventured. DK Metcalf as well. AJ Brown. Those are a couple names. Just throwing them out. All right, we had a question that came in from Rogo as a follow-up. Rogo says, I'm just thinking ahead in case if Otten gets injured at all. Why would he get injured? Look, that's the thing. If you're going to kind of... Oh, okay, so you're basically just thinking, just in case I want to have a handcuffed tight end on roster. I understand. Because of the... Okay, understood. So, then Nick Chubb is the cut, Rogo. because you're never going to play him. In no scenario upcoming would you play him. And I don't see a chance in this wonderful fantasy season in which you're ever going to play him over Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. So that's the cut then in that scenario, Rogo. Yeah, you should have just been a little bit more forward with it and told me, hey, listen, this is a handcuff. So that I didn't have to go on a 10-minute tangent on the on the opposite side of that coin. All right, let's see here. In the chat, Charlene says, hey, Andrew, how does the Lions defense rest the season? I mean, look, for the next coming weeks, they're great. Once they start taking on these more competitive matchups, for example, Buffalo, Green Bay, San Francisco, a little bit sketchier of a program. But again, they have been like 6, 7, 8 points against everyone. They haven't allowed more than one passing touchdown to every quarterback, and they've gotten an interception every single game. The defense is legit. As long as they're healthy by the time we get to the late half of the season, I'd still continue to roster them and play them because they have played as well as they have. Courtney in the chat says, okay, so she's talking to Frosty, no problem. Ben says, how does Dowdle still have value? They play Panthers down the stretch. I mean, Dowdle doesn't even get enough workload. I understand that the matchup against the Panthers is relatively favorable, but I don't even know by the time we get there whether he's going to get enough touches to be of value. So time will tell. But I mean, again, for the purposes of the matchup, it's solid, but we have seen many running backs over the course of this season thus far blunder said matchup. I specifically remember Javonte Williams and Zamir White both blundering that matchup. Additionally, so did Austin Eckler. Continuing on, Tony Lopez says, is JSN a good wide receiver to rest the season? I would assume so. If the opportunity continues to stay persistent, I would say yes. Are we worried about Nico Collins? I'm not worried about him. He'll be fine. Let's see here. Again, if it wasn't, I don't even understand. Like, I get it. Ineligible player downfield. I thought an offensive lineman could at very least go down the field 2 yards. Okay? If you're running a flatline screen in which you have to step down, you have to pretty much fake like you're down blocking so that the defensive end can squeeze down so that you can lip around them and get to the corner. I would assume that he was in an eligible field. Them calling back that 70-yard touchdown is brutal, to say the least. But he'll make plays. He is an incredible wide receiver. So I'm not worried. Okay, let's see here. Alex Ruiz sends in a question. It says PPR, bonus points for reception yardage, JT or Debo. In a PPR scoring format this week, I'm not playing Jonathan Taylor versus the Lions. I'd prefer not to. I'd rather play Debo this week. As for your next question, also 6 point per passing touchdown Superflex, pick 2 for week 12. Richardson, May, Winston. Depending on how the weather looks like on Thursday, I'm leaning currently towards playing May and Winston, because I believe in a 6 point per passing touchdown format, they are more eligible to have the multiple touchdown game through the air. Now, in the event in which Thursday's game is a rain fest and it's a complete disaster outdoors in Cleveland, at that point, I would just pivot to playing May alongside of Richardson. Moving on to a question from Dirk Doug, who says, Burrow on a bye week, who should I play, May or Geno? I'd rather play May, I think. Geno is a solid player, but ultimately, that Arizona's defense has been playing incredibly well. I'd rather just play May, especially considering what quarterbacks have done to Miami's defense as of late. I think that's preferred. Let's see here. We move on to Austin M, who says, happy birthday, Andrew. Lineup help, full PPR. Let's see, what do we have? 1 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex. We have Dowdle, we have Hunt, we have Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore, we have Tillman, we have Hopkins, we have Juwan Jennings. Okay, I mean, look, as of this point, right? Looking at the roster, your running backs are cooked. Is that really your starting running backs, Dowdle and Hunt? You don't have anybody else? Austin? Or are you holding back on me? Are we, okay, you know what? Here's my question. Are we setting the lineup? Because if we're only playing one of these running backs, you have to play Dowdle because Hunt is not going to play this week. Pacheco's taking over. In the event in which Pacheco is inactive, then you would comfortably play Hunt, but I don't think that's going to happen. So Dowdle has to be your RB1. And then as for your 3 wide receivers of the available, Juwan Jennings is a must start. Marvin Harrison is a must start. And then after that, if it's between Hopkins, am I playing DJ Moore? I mean, am I playing DJ Moore over the alternatives? That is as difficult of a question as it gets. As of right now, out of those available, I'm probably playing Hopkins. And then in the flex, I'm probably playing Tillman. So I probably would go like Dowdle, Marvin Harrison, Juwan Jennings, Hopkins, Tillman as of right now. Courtney in the chat says, okay, my starting lineup What do you think? We have Jalen Hurts, we have Reed, we have Metcalf, we have Quentin Johnston, we have Jacobs, Pacheco, Kittle, Romo, and Kansas City's defense. What do you think? My bench is Nix, Tillman, and Lutz. Yeah, as of right now, Kansas City's defense is great. Romo a little bit sketchy. I think Lutz could be a better play within the upcoming matchup, depending on where it is. I don't know how the weather's going to be. If it's in Las Vegas and it's an indoor stadium, I think that's perfectly fine. Kittle should be healthy, ready to go. So should, Pacheco against Carolina. That's fantastic. Jacobs has been playing great. Quentin Johnston scores touchdowns every week with his eyes closed. Reed should be, I don't have an issue with this roster. I keep it as is. Good to go there, Courtney. Class of 97 in the chat says, my receivers are Amon-Ra, Terry, Reed, and Adams. Who do I, would you drop one for Ladd McConkey, Juwan Jennings, Judy, and or Worthy in a non-PPR? Am I crazy to say that I'd rather have Juwan Jennings than Devontae Adams rest of the season? Am I the only one? You know what? Let's poll this. Start a poll. Who would you rather have rest of season? Be honest. If you're on the Adams side, so be it. But I'm really considering the potential that Juwan Jennings might be it. Dirk Doug has sent in another live chat question. It says, trade Pearsall for Cedric. Is that a bad move? No, I don't think it's a bad move. Again, Pearsall is the sketchiness about Pearsall is that he is behind Debo, Juwan Jennings, Kittle, and McCaffrey. He's the number 5 option of the offense. That is the issue there. In comparison to Cedric, who at very worst is 4, but in some certain weeks, like he has shown earlier this season, can be number 1. While Pearsall will never be the number 1 of that offense in a given week. So, no, it's not a bad trade. Let's see here. So we took care of Dirk Doug there again. Thank you, Dirk. I appreciate it. Malcolm King sends in a question. Says, Superflex, full PPR, bonus points, 6 point per passing touchdown. Darnold, Stroud, Love, Marvin Harrison, Juwan Jennings, Nico Reed, Pacheco, Achane, Kyron, Tracy. Wow, this is a really strong team. Who would you start this week in a 2 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format? Okay, so in regards to this upcoming matchup, right? So, okay. So, off the top of my head, my immediate thought is that I'm probably rolling with Stroud and Love at quarterback. At wide receiver, I'm going with Nico Collins alongside of Marvin Harrison. At running back, I'm playing Pacheco and Achane. And in the flex, holy shit, your team is stacked. Am I benching Reed, Juwan, and Kyron? I mean, one of the three's got to be benched, right? I mean, Jesus Louise, my God. Malcolm, you're killing me here. Off the top of my head, how do I want to play this week? I'm not playing Kyron. I don't trust the matchup against the Eagles. And then we have Reed against I think I'm playing Juwan Jennings in the flex. So I think it's Stroud, Love, Marvin Harrison, Juwan Jennings, Nico, Pacheco, and Achane. I think that's the lineup. Class of 97 has sent in a follow-up super chat. Class, where's your question? Was it the one that I answered earlier? Because I think the only change that I actually make there, class of 97, is actually picking up Juwan Jennings. Because also, Adams is on a bye week, so you're not gonna use him this week, right? I don't know. It may be a little bit sketchy, and I might be biased because my main league has Juwan Jennings, and he is absolutely carrying for me. Like in my main home league, I didn't have Kyler, and he's my second quarterback, and my only alternative option at quarterback was to play Cooper Rush, and I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. So I played Juwan Jennings in my super flex, and the guy had 10 catches for 91 and a touchdown on 11 targets. As far as I'm concerned, he's the number 1 receiving option of that offense going forward, considering each of the last 2 games, he has had 11 targets. And earlier this season, he has demonstrated that he can very easily kind of integrate himself within this offense and be the favorite option of Brock Purdy. So I feel like that's the move. Let's see here. Austin M says Jennings is basically a better Ayuk. Dude, you know how crazy of a statement that is, though? Like, I'm not saying you're wrong, Austin. It's just imagine how crazy of a statement that is after all of the wear and tear on the mental that the organization had trying to sign Ayuk to a contract. Can you imagine that all along they had Jawan Jennings sitting there and he's just like kind of low key? He actually got himself an extension to his contract this season. Jennings, let me go find the website. Jennings this season, he got himself an extension. It was a 2-year extension for $12 million. Okay, he's getting paid $6 million a year. Okay, just put this into perspective. Brandon Ayuk, okay, on per year average, based on the cost, let me find it right now. Brandon Ayuk just got a 4-year, $120 million deal. You're telling me that Brandon Ayuk is 5 times more valuable than Jawan Jennings. That is what they designate him in terms of value of contract. 5 times more valuable per year. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? It's wow, ridiculous. Okay, let's see here. We move on. Constantino, what's up? Okay, Constantino's talking to Charlene. Every day is Andrew's birthday. That's correct. Thank you. Jocelyn in the chat says, what do we think about Neighbors, bro? Is he done for the rest of the season? Listen, Tommy Cutlets, all right? Let Tommy Cutlets cook. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. If Tommy DeVito is going to, air it out, then great. I'm actually curious. Let me see here. If I go to last season, I'm curious as to how much wide receiver production the Giants got with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. I don't even remember, because all I remember was Saquon against that Green Bay Packers game last year where he carried the team on his back. But let's see. If I go to the Giants and then I go to game logs from last year. So DeVito started from weeks, let's see here. He started from weeks 9 through 14. No, a little bit farther than that. 9 through 15. And he got injured in week 16, I think. So okay, so let's see the wide receiver production throughout that time. Let's see like Darius Slayton. Slayton, 1 for 22, 4 for 59, 3 for 21, 4 for 81 in the yeah, nothing great. Doesn't look great. His favorite target was Wan'Dale Robinson, though. That is for sure. Wan'Dale Robinson was feasting, at least in comparison to all the other wide receivers in the offense. I don't know. Look, the offense is very much so predicated on getting the ball to Neighbors. Is he cooked? Potentially. This is why I talked about him last week. We talked about, okay, do we want to trade for Neighbors? If they bench Andy Dalton, it's probably going to be Drew Lock. Now that it's Tommy DeVito, it's even worse of a situation. So I think he may be cooked. Inky says, do you trust Jaden Reed more than Kyron? Are we talking about trading Jaden Reed, or are we talking about trading Kyron for Jaden Reed? I wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't. Angel Montero says, hey Andrew, should I trade away Jonathan Taylor for Bucky Irving? Wow. I don't feel like I can get James Conner right now. I don't want to give up depth. Okay, so let's... So this could either go down as the greatest trade of all time or the worst trade of all time. Look, this is what I see it as. Over the course of the last 3 games, the last 4, dude, look at Bucky Irving in the last month. 18.5, 16.7, 15.4. He had a 6.4 point game against Kansas City, which is the most difficult matchup of running back, then 17.7. He has put up over 15 points in a PPR in 4 of the last 5 games. And now has even easier matchups because throughout that span of time, took on New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco. Now he gets to be unleashed against New York Giants, Carolina, Las Vegas, Los Angeles Chargers, Dallas, and Carolina again. I'm not going to even joke. I take it. I would rather have Bucky. Thank you. It's crazy, but I think it is the case. His red hair gives him the edge. Onage, you're not wrong. Onage, what did you say at the beginning of the live stream? I saw your message. I didn't. You were talking in like hieroglyphs. I was like, what is this guy saying? You said like, I don't even know. You had like acronyms. You said this versus this, Onage. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? I was like, what is even that? Let's see here. Ethan says, should I sell Ingram? Or do you think he'll pick up after the bye, even considering Gabe Davis? I mean, look, he's going to be the number 1 receiving target going forward. So even if Mac Jones is the quarterback, I still trust him in a full PPR. In a half PPR, I don't think he's trustable. I think at that point, you would potentially move on from him. But in a full PPR, receptions, receiving yards, there's a potential of Trevor Lawrence coming back. I think he could be a solid option going forward for sure, like a top 10 tight end rest of the way. But if you're talking about a half PPR format, not as safe as an option in this circumstance, even with, Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk out for the season. Joseph Mai says, do I trade Connor and Pollard for James Cook in a half PPR? Yeah, I would trade Pollard for James Cook. Absolutely, without a doubt in my mind. Neil says, do I trade Cook, Pickens, and Bucky for Mixon? You're going to trade 3 monsters for 1? No. Unless you're playing in a 6-man league, I would not do that. Inky says, I meant specifically week 12, Jaden Reed or... Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. Specifically for week 12, I'd rather have Jaden Reed. That's who I would trust more at the moment, because I really do not want to play anybody. I mean, we're going to have to play Puka and Cooper Kupp against the Philly defense, but that Philly defense has been incredible this season as of late. Ben says, hi, Andrew. In my league, I believe I could trade Fab and Rico Dowdle for Trey Benson. How much Fab would you give? I have 40% of mine currently left. I also have Jonnu and Kraft going forward. Thanks. Okay. How much of that? Okay, well, I think it's very much so dependent. Look, here's the thing. Giving up Dowdle for Trey Benson, okay, I think that is equal in itself, because Dowdle is technically a starter and Benson is a handcuff. So maybe throw him 5 Fab. If he's okay with that, go for it. Honestly, I would just say just 1 for 1 it and keep your Fab. But if they're not going to be okay with that, just slowly but surely keep, drip feeding them. 5, okay, not 5, 7. Okay, not 7, I'll give you 9. And just keep drip feeding them until they come to a happy point. Baker versus the Giants this week, or Herbert versus the Baltimore Ravens? I have Evans. Yeah, I'm going to play Baker this week. Thank you. Class of 97 says, what leagues y'all be in that does all those trades in a 10-man, 2 quarterback, superflex league, non-PPR? We only have 3. Yeah, you only have 3 trades all season. Class of 97, that's crazy. Look, here's the thing. I've even thought about, in some of my leagues, potentially implementing a situation where you have to have a minimum of amount of trades. Like, you have to make a minimum of 2 trades every year. Because some teams especially like some of the home leagues that I play in with the homies, they don't want to move. They just are going to sit on their team and they'll go to the bottom of the leaderboard. Trevor Lawrence is coming back after the bye. Hold on the BTJ. Yeah, let's hope so. Fingers crossed. Should I pick up Wandell? Question. Wandell Quentin Johnston is my flex right now. I'd keep Quentin Johnston there, especially against the Baltimore matchup. I'm very comfortable with that. Bro, that Anthony Richardson call was money on Sunday. Listen, you can thank Dilo. Dilo's been around the channel for many of years now. I would say since maybe near the inception of it. He comes out around every now and then. Otherwise, he shoots me messages on Twitter. The guy's a prophet, I'm telling you. Sometimes he'll show up. He'll say, Andrew, play this guy. And I swear to God, he'll drop 30 points every time. But he doesn't do it often. And when he does it at like the last 5 minutes of the live stream. Like, I feel like he has the sports almanac. He's from the future and he's just hanging out and he's just hooking me up. Like, I swear that is what's happening. I'm convinced at this point. Rajo says, Tillman or Elijah Moore rest season? I'd rather have Tillman still. Thank you. I think Elijah Moore is a great option, but he's going to be on the field objectively less because he plays in the slot position. The offense will have to run a lot more potential 12 personnel sets as they persist, especially with the weather as it goes. So in those circumstances, there will be less, Elijah Moore in comparison in terms of total opportunities. Freedom Fighter says, Trevor, okay, yeah, we took care of that one. Frosty says, Andrew, us Camaro owners are grouping up to visit New Orleans, find a local shaman or something, and cursing Taysom Hill. You want to join us? Could be fun. That's a good one, Frosty. Dude, Taysom Hill, when we say, hey, listen, Taysom Hill, he just needs to score a touchdown, he'll be relevant for fantasy. What we didn't mean by that, or what I didn't mean by that, was 130 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 8 receptions, and 50 receiving yards. Like, dude, I don't get it. It's incredible. Kate in the chat says, how would you rank Jennings, Sutton, Reed, Evans, Hill, Tillman rest of the season? Okay, Kate. So there's a lot of names there. I'm going to write them down really quickly on a notepad, and we're going to get through this slowly but surely. In terms of rest of season value for these players, Hill is number 1. Evans is number 2. Who else do we have? Jennings, Sutton, Reed. Okay. Sutton is number 3. Arguably, Jennings is 4. Reed is 5. And Tillman is 6. Again, top to bottom. Hill 1, Evans 2, Sutton 3, Jennings 4, Reed 5, Tillman 6. Thank you, Kate. Continuing on, we had a question from Lou, who says, PPR, I have Kincaid, Ertz, Disley, Smith on the waivers. Cool. So you should probably look to, because especially considering Kincaid is on a bye week this week, if we're specifically looking to pick up and play one of them, my suggestion would be picking up and playing Smith. But if in fact somebody is going to beat you to it, Disley's the next best option. If that gets taken, you go after Ertz. But that is the order which I would go about it this week. Angel Montero says sending a slip next time. I agree. Next time Dilo comes in here and says somebody's name, I'm putting all the money on it. Timestamp says, as a Niners fan, Juwan is the truth. I know, dude, he's ridiculous. As a Rams fan, I'm fully aware as to how good he is, right? It's incredible. It really is. I'm happy for him. I mean, I'm so glad that he is producing at the way that he has, because there's a possibility that if he continues to play this well, hear me out. What if there's a possibility that maybe the 49ers are like, all right, let's just trade Ayuk or let's just trade Debo next year. We can't afford it anyway. We're going to have to pay Brock Purdy in the upcoming future. We're going to have to move one of these receivers. Like, imagine that reality. Jawan Jennings, again, how old is Jawan Jennings? Jawan Jennings, age 27, dude. He's in his prime. He's getting there. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Cavalry says, is it time to bench Hunt? Yes, especially considering Pacheco's back this week. Let's see here. Joseph Mai says, week 12 quarterback. Would you rather choose Stafford, Anthony Richardson, Geno, Tua, or Cousins? Cousins is on a bye. Out of those other available quarterbacks, I'm playing Tua Tagovailoa. Thank you. Brendan Gold says, PPR, wide receivers are Chase, Nico, Puka, London. Wow, you're stacked. Okay, Pacheco, Chubb, Hunt are my running backs. Okay, so you need a running back. I got offered James Conner and Devontae Smith for Puka. Do I take it? I think you kind of... Okay, so here's the thing. If that is the best running back that you can get in exchange for Puka, then sure. But I would potentially try to see if there's a possibility, because again, I do believe that James Conner is a top 12 running back rest of season, clearly. But if there's a possibility where somehow, some way you can go out and trade for a better running back, then you should, explore that. If somebody in your league is super desperate for a wide receiver and they're willing to send off, let me think here. What is a running back that theoretically could come back in that exchange? Yeah, no, honestly, I'm okay with it. Unless someone's going to give you like a Josh Jacobs, just take the Connor. That's fine. I know that it hurts your wide receiver depth with only getting back Devontae Smith, who hasn't been great as of late. But I think you're at such a desperate need of running back that if someone's not going to give you like a McCaffrey, straight up 1-for-1, or someone's not going to give you a Chase Brown or a Bijan or something of that kind of potential, an Achane, Jacobs, then I'll take Connor. I'm okay with that. Let's see here. We scroll down. We see a question that comes in from Rajo. It says, no Jamar, no Brees this week. Pick 2 running backs and 1 flex. Kenneth Walker, Jacobs, Gibbs, A.J. Brown, Cup, and 1 flex. Okay, so we're starting 2 running backs, 1 flex. Okay. So, as of right now, of the available options you have here, how do we want to go about this? A.J. Brown has to play. So that is your flex. And then as for your RBs, Kenneth Walker, Jacobs, Gibbs. As of right now, I'm probably most interested in playing Jacobs and Gibbs, if it's me. Thank you. So Jacobs, Gibbs, and A.J. Brown would be the way that I go about exploring that, Rajo. Kyron Williams, ACL, says, Devontae Adams for Chase Brown. I've got Reek, Evans, and Puka. Yes, absolutely. Chase Brown, I don't know if I'm the only one that sees it as such. When I look at him play, it reminds me of Austin Eckler. It reminds me of like Chargers prime Austin Eckler, 2021 Austin Eckler. That's what it reminds me of. Like spitting image. The way that he moves, the way that he's giving those little handoffs. He's a small little running back making plays out of the backfield. I don't know what it is, but I get Eckler vibes. And he's playing like Eckler as of late. He's balling out. Mikey says, What's up, my boy? Questions in the chat. Happy birthday. Thank you, Mikey. Where is your question? It says, okay, so there's 2 questions here. Part 1 says full PPR. Murray, Wilson. Do I keep? I mean, at this point, considering you have Murray, I'd start him rest of season every week, probably henceforth. So you don't have to keep Wilson. Then you have Rashad White, you have Tracy, you have Benson, you have ETN. So you definitely don't have much running back depth. You have Garrett Wilson, you have Marvin Harrison, you have Debo, you have Jawan Jennings, you have Mark Andrews, Hunter Henry. What's the team this week? Okay, so, and then your second follow-up, okay, we'll talk about the waivers in a moment. But as for your team this week as it stands, Murray starts, Rashad White starts, Tracy starts, Marvin Harrison starts, Debo starts, Jennings is in your flex, and Mark Andrews is your starting tight end. And then as for your second part, it says waiver is RB, Roshan, Akers, Westbrook, Ikine, Bourne, Elijah Moore, grab or no? Yeah, I'd be willing to pick up Elijah Moore there. Am I going to start him in your team? No, because you have a bunch of better wide receivers, but I'd pick him up in order to ensure that nobody else in your league gets him. But if you had to drop somebody in order to do so, I wouldn't. Thank you for the question, Mikey. Dirk Doug says in the chat, says London is on a bye. Should I go after Jaden Reed and Tillman with should I go Jaden and Tillman with Tracy in the flex, or Reed and JMO with Tracy in the flex? Whew. Yeah, JMO's another one of those, home run hitters, which is interesting. As of right now, if Laporta is out, I'm thinking you go Reed and JMO. That's the way I'm thinking about it. If Laporta is out. Otherwise, I go Reed and Tracy. Thank you. Alrighty. Luke C says, my friend, I think you passed my super chat. Did I? I thought I answered it, but maybe you sent in another one that I didn't see. I must have missed it. Did I miss it? It says PPR, 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers and 1 flex. I think I did miss this one. My apologies, Luke. He says, trade Stroud/DJ Moore for Bucky. Yes, absolutely. Give me Bucky immediately. I have Nico, Tillman, Devontae Smith. Yeah, absolutely. I have no issue with that at all. Give me Bucky Irving. That is going to be a huge upgrade for your team. Sorry about that, Luke. My apologies. Didn't mean to miss that. Murray or Herbert rest season? I mean, again, I think both of them are really solid. I'd rather probably still have Murray in that circumstance. Let's see here. We took care of that. Okay. Angel Montero, appreciate it. Yep, no problem. It says, what should I do to prepare for Week 18 championship? It's 2 rounds running Week 17, 18 full PPR. The only thing that you can prepare for Week 18 championship is, oh man, I was going to say something. I was going to say the only way you can prepare is buying a bunch of eggs, okay? And then going to the commissioner's house and throwing it at their house. Literally, okay, let's be honest here, okay? Let's be totally honest. You should not be playing in a 2-round championship because that is an obscene format. But additionally, you should never be playing in Week 18. So, as of right now, the only way to prepare is hope that the players that you have on roster are not going to be sitting because they're not implicated with the number 1 seeds of their division. So if you have Kelsey, be very careful because come Week 18, he's probably not playing because they're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. Now, as for the NFC, let's see here. It's probably going to be the Detroit Lions if I had to guess. NFL standings, let's pull this up. The Detroit Lions, as of right now within the NFC, are, let's see here, they're 9-1. Nobody's even remotely close. There's an Eagles team that's 8-2. There's a Vikings team that's 8-2. But again, I'm going to assume that the Lions, let's say the Lions, the Bills, the Chiefs, these teams that are above and beyond the top of the record, I assume they're going to sit their starters because they don't need a win in that week because they've already secured a position or they've won their division, etc. At that point, again, it's so long. It's so far in the future that we're not going to know. Like, let's say, for example, the Arizona Cardinals win their division and they know that they're not going to be able to secure a first-round bye. They're not going to play any of their starters in Week 18. Therefore, Connor's sitting, Kyler's sitting, and they're preparing for the next week for Wild Card Weekend, right? Like, so just don't play in Week 18. That's all I can say. Because really, there's nothing to prepare because you just don't know who's going to play and who's going to be sitting. Russ, May, or Darnold the rest of the season? I'd probably lean towards Darnold in that scenario. All right, guys. How long have we been here for? We've been here for 1 hour 30. Okay, that's typically where I like to call it. I appreciate y'all coming through. I'll be back tomorrow with the running back rankings for Week 12, along with the live stream starting at 7 p.m. PST tomorrow night. I do appreciate y'all. Typically, again, we want to have our live streams for about an hour and a half, and we've gone ahead and we've hit that and gone a little bit overboard. But either way, I appreciate y'all. I'm going to go work on rankings for tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and cue the music. Have a great rest of your night. Much love. I appreciate y'all. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace. Dude, I still can't believe that Nico Collins couldn't get 60 receiving yards. Like, we weren't even asking for much, right? Am I crazy? 60 receiving yards. Like, I get it. Like, okay, you got a 75-yard touchdown called back, and then you drop a 20-yarder. Like, what are we doing? We couldn't get 60 yards. We're scoring 34 points. Somebody asked Juwan Jennings or Downs rest of season. I'd rather have Juwan Jennings. Yeah, especially considering he doesn't have an upcoming bye week. Like, that's the way we go. Yeah, that's the way we go. Class of 97 says, how do you rank all these wide receivers? Terry, Jawan, Reed, Adams. I mean, in terms of rest of season, excluding like, if we're not counting bye weeks against players, like Terry's still number 1. Jawan's probably 2 at this point. Reed's 3 and Adams is 4. Listen, we always do post-show shenanigans every now and then. But like this is, how like in Marvel movies, if you wait till after the credits, there's like a little post-credit scene. I'm fucking dead. I'm leaving. Good night, guys.